Hi!
Hello!
Welcome to DnDTime Talks, the show where we discuss all things Dungeons and Dragons. I'm Pete.
I'm Jeremy. Pete, how you doing?
I'm doing great. As soon as you started,
I'm sorry. Data wanted
Data's
to let everyone
very
know that
loud.
he's Data.
Data's doing very well, it sounds like. As soon as you started that, I clicked on a tab that I had open that had a YouTube video on it. So as you were doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown, it was just perfectly on beat. There was just like a so it got me like really hyped and ready to go into the start
Really
of this
hyped up.
episode. What about you, Jeremy? How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm ready to talk about the finality of death.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. Getting into the most. Wow.
Yeah, Sword, we started on time. Guys, I want to share something with you. It's an
We started
upgrade to the
early.
stream. The cat cam. That's right, guys. We now have a special webcam just for when Data sits on my computer. Now, he's only here right now because I bribed him with treats. But, maybe he'll actually hang out at some point in the future. Data, say hello to everyone.
This is how you get YouTube views, folks.
Guys, this is how you do it.
This is how you get the big money. It's by putting a cat cam
number
on your
one.
stream.
Oh,
yeah,
Chief,
exactly.
I'm not getting more cat cams. He's not even going to use this cat cam.
I think the implication was that cat cam is the number one attraction here at DnDTime.
Oh, that's accurate.
Which is definitely true. Hashtag so.
Yeah, well,
what you gonna do? You have to do what you have to do to survive in this competitive market, and sometimes that thing is a cat cam.
Stay up here, you crap.
Yeah, but we're gonna be talking about death. Now that it's a good thing you put in the cat cam today because we need it. I think going into. No, it should be a fun topic. We're going to be talking about the permanence, or because it's Dungeons and Dragons, in a lot of cases, the impermanence of death in your settings and how that's going to impact your games. And yeah, we'll be talking about resurrection, and we'll be talking about, the afterlife and D&D world. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm kind of excited to hop in.
Yeah, I'm interested too, because I feel like, a lot of players and a lot of DMs. So, like in the last couple episodes, right, we're talking about. I feel like most DMs do magic wrong, or most DMs do economy wrong, or they go about it the wrong way. This is kind of the one where I feel like a lot of DMs come into the world like with a plan. They know exactly how death and reincarnation is going to work in the world. They're like, all right, here's my plan, and then it collapses when one of their players dies early, and they're like, ah, shit. You know what I mean, Pete?
I had one of those once. A plan for death. Unfortunately, that campaign didn't go very far. But there's say living indeed.
Maybe not say living. It's not life. Sorry, go ahead.
Say I don't know what the Latin word for life is. I don't even think that's Latin. I'm out of control. Before we get into it, as always, if you have thoughts on what we're talking about, please speak up in chat and let us know. We'll be looking at chat as we go through. As I mentioned last week, but for anyone who wasn't aware, I now have 2 monitors, so I can actually look at chat. So I'll be paying more attention than I ever have before. Also, if you are interested, at the end of each DnDTime Talks, we do a segment called Ask Pete and Jeremy, where you guys ask us questions that may be related to Dungeons and Dragons. They may not be, but the place where we get those questions is from Discord. So if you wish to hop onto Discord and ask us some goofy questions, you are welcome to do so. And the link to that is down below. Oh, and Jeremy just posted it there in chat.
We also accept deathly serious.
We don't actually. Just as a quick caveat, no, we don't accept those questions. So please, nothing too terrible and rough. So Jeremy, want to take us in? Want to start talking about death?
Yeah, you start, Pete.
Okay, sure. It's bad and it's scary. And that's kind of really what the core of what we're going to be talking about today. And that was a joke. But I think
it's also true.
Yeah, I think the most defining thing about death is that it's very scary. It defines the way a lot of people live in this life. And in the game world, it's very easy to assume the same. The core difference is some people in the worlds of D&D get to skirt around and avoid death. And therein lies some of the nuance that is going to start coming into your games as we talk about death and as part of our sort of world building series and kick that we're on, I think we're going to talk a lot about like building a world and what it means for to have, what the implications of the way that you choose to treat death in your world are.
Yeah, and I mean, so if we're talking about the finality of like death, actually you're dead, everything's gone, who knows what happens next? That's like Pete was saying, much like real life, and you probably know how people act about that because that's that's how life
That's real
is.
life.
That's the world.
Yeah.
No one knows. But if we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, right? We're talking about a world where things are different. That's a really cool, interesting time to play around with how people might act and treat certain things, whether it be economy, just general social status and behaviors, and all of that.
As an additional thing, we'll probably get into too. In most D&D worlds, there's divine proof. So afterlife, in probably a lot of these cases, isn't just dreamed of and thought of and considered, but assured. So I bet you not I bet you, I know that there's also a lot of interesting stuff that we'll probably be talking about in that regard as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really important thing to include this kind of stuff in your game, and to think about it. And a lot of people don't. They just kind of assume some weird hybrid of like, yeah, people act the way people act like in the real world, but they don't actually take into account that like death and resurrection is like a thing, maybe even a common thing in the setting. It's important, I think, to really think about that because D&D can be an escapism for a lot of people, and that's something that you can do in the game that can't happen in real life. If you die in real life, it sucks. Probably sucks. I don't know. You're dead. It's bad. But in Dungeons and Dragons, you can come back. So it's an interesting thing to consider.
If you die in the game, do you die in real life?
No, you don't.
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad we've started out there.
I love Roger Twice's comment in the chat. Random reincarnation tables with animals and weird stuff is pretty much the best. Oh boy. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that for certain.
I like reincarnation as a spell, and it's one of my favorite things in Dungeons and Dragons. But
I think to each their own.
Yeah. Well, that's also because of my overwhelmingly single and positive experience with it, I imagine.
He was the best.
Yeah, he was the best. We'll come back around to that, I've no doubt. The first thing to ask yourself is, I think, is death going to be permanent in your world? How heavily and how common is resurrection? Because that's where you're going to start making all of your, that's where you're going to start asking questions and starting to build out the mythos and thinking about how the people of your world think. So to begin with, I would like to talk about a world in which death is kind of irrelevant, and then work our way back down to reality as like an overarching course, because I think less campaigns tend to go the really, really heavy resurrection route rather than just like, resurrection are rare miracles and high-level clerics can do it, but it's not just everyone walking down the street gets resurrected.
They're rare miracles, except for when the party dies, in which case they're super common.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sure, yeah, let's talk about the super available world, right? That's what we want to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's scaled down. We'll just increase death more and more as we move through.
Oh boy. So what are some of the main things like we'd see in this world? Do we want to talk about like the social implications or like the political implications?
There's a lot of them, but for starters, I think a great place to begin is which people get to come back, because I think there's an assumption that even in a world in which there is a lot of I gotta stop for a moment to point out Max Meister's birthday today. We're talking about death on my birthday. That is absolutely true. I'm sorry that we have done this,
but we
Max.
mean it in the best way.
Absolutely. Binding Sheep also says, just give your players a single Revivify scroll at the start for one get out of jail free card. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad idea. You could do that.
Unrelated to the overarching theme today.
Indeed. So, what were we talking about? We were talking about a world in which people die frequently. I think the first thing to think about is who gets to come back, because I assume no one just makes everyone come back, because that's like a whole other thing that we could probably take a whole.
Well, that's just a whole other. That's bizarre.
That's a weird setting. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So let's talk about. I mean, a very common thing in any of these coming back from the dead spells that you'll find, at least in 5th edition, are if you die of old age, you don't come back. They don't work. And that's an interesting one. I think reincarnation might be the only one that can kind of go around that one.
Circumvent that, yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe true. No, I think true resurrection even still has a requirement like or something. But these all the resurrection spells in 5th edition have a caveat that if you die of old age, you don't come back. And this is an important thing that you need to think about in your setting if you want to just stick with that caveat that 5th edition sets out. And it's a really important one because that affects, political, social, everything.
If you can
live forever king, right, doesn't exist with that ability. At least not like a normal human.
Exactly. That was very succinctly put, Jeremy. The live forever king is, I think, the exact inevitable scenario when the former is the case. But I think it is fair to say, because another thing that's just in the mechanics of 5e are that resurrection spells, as they are written, have an immense cost in terms of diamonds, but really that cost is more reflected in gold. So there are spells that have, do you know off the top of your head what the baseline resurrection is? Is it a diamond worth 500 for the first one?
500 for Raise Dead, 1,000. No, 300 for Revivify, 500 for Raise Dead, 1,000 for Resurrection, and 10,000 for True Resurrection.
That sounds about right to me. Which is an immense amount of money unless you are wealthy. In which case, 500 gold to come back to life really is not that significant of an amount of money. 25,000 for True Resurrection, which is, fair because that's a good spell.
I mean, to put this in kind of perspective, at 25,000 gold, that's about the cost of a legendary magic in 5th thing, right? Or maybe that's very rare.
That sounds rightish to me. No, does 25,000 account for old age? Can you True Resurrection someone who died of old age?
No, I don't think you. I think the only way to bring in someone who died of old age back to life is through maybe a reincarnation
or or necromancy.
Reincarnation will bring him back even if they died of old age, which is weird.
An odd choice to put that in, but
yeah, weird. I think maybe it was an oversight, and you can do it forcibly via wish.
Yes.
It looks like
clone spell.
She was saying the clone spell can do it.
Yeah.
But I guess the main points we're looking at is looking in the common spells in 5th edition, like you were saying, it costs a lot of money. Only the really wealthy come back. And there's a lot of interesting social caveats with that. How valuable are assassins, right? And assassinations, and how frequent are they? You can just bring someone back. And if that is a commonplace thing for your wealthy people.
In the same vein, how does that affect things that are assumed, like, in execution? Is it a greater punishment if it's easy to bring someone back to life? Are executions like heavily monitored and then the bodies are like interned in places where they can't be accessed? Or, is banishment the greater crime because they know it's easy to bring people back to life, or the greater punishment?
Yeah.
There's lots of little things that start to come in.
Yeah, and when you look at certain spells, like Raise Dead, for example, is a fairly low-level spell. It's only 5th level, which means characters of 9th level spellcasters can gain access to it. And I think that's the first, true, the creature has been dead for a time, we're bringing him back kind of spell. And I know there's some interesting caveats with it. For example, the creature has to be whole. You can't a decapitated creature, for example, can't be back. And so that brings some interesting thoughts into, I was playing in a game one time where the dungeon master, there were some murders that were occurring. And this was in a place that had, resurrection was like a fairly commonplace thing. But the people that were committing the murders were decapitating and stealing the heads of their victims to prevent them from being able to be brought, which is a very interesting scenario.
Yeah, it's very dark. And that's the kind of stuff, when you start to think about the implications of people coming back from death, you obviously, I think you often end up going to some very dark places and thinking about what you could do with that. Some of which we probably won't go to here, but there's definitely some, where there is a way to cheat death, there will be people that will try and take advantage of that.
Yeah, and what's also really interesting about that is a cleric called Divine Intervention, which you get at 10th level, which does have the ability to bring a person back from the dead. Try it every day. You get a 10 in 100 chance. You get basically a 10%, 10% chance of bringing someone back from the dead. It's a really interesting thing that that also happened in that as a means of overcoming that. So you have to consider how not just death and resurrection affect the spells that would bring people back and maybe their availability, but also is there kind of a divine aspect to it? Can the gods bring them back? And do they have like the active ability to do that?
But these are a lot of like the logistics of it. But I think something that's maybe even more important is, how do people feel about the fact that people can come back from the dead? Like, what are the moral implications of a world in which resurrection is relatively easy? And they're very complicated, is my answer. And I can't even fully wrap my head around what it would be like to live in a society like that. But one thing I'm fairly confident on saying is that the people in that society, there would be a lot of people that were against resurrection. I feel like there are people who would, even divine resurrection, consider that sort of thing unnatural, and would maybe look at people who've been resurrected and who've been to the other side. Those people would be looked at differently. Maybe not negatively, maybe not positively, but definitely people who have been to the great beyond, they would be looked at in a much different way.
And that's another interesting thing to consider is there an afterlife in your setting? Because once, we're not going to go into a ton of detail now because it's a whole talk in its own right. But let's say you determine, yes, there is an afterlife. And whether you're taking the Forgotten Realms afterlife, where there are gods and you petition to them and whatever, or the more the classical, actually, I don't even know what the Greek pantheon would believe, but regardless,
Olympus?
Like, yeah, Mount Olympus or whatever, or if you're going like the Christian, I say Christian, I don't, the Catholic pantheon, maybe all, yeah, I think all Christianity,
heaven, the traditional idea of heaven, yeah.
But you take all of these kind of concepts, and regardless of which one you follow, it or you put in your world, so you got to now think of, okay, if people can come back, what are the implications of that in that context, right? The people who come back remember what their time was like in the afterlife? Do they never quite arrive in the afterlife? Is there like a time period between when they can be brought back? And some spells put time periods on it. But do you want to impose some other greater time period on it that that's how long it takes for the soul to fully enter the afterlife or whatever bullshit? Do they remember their time in the afterlife? Because that's
a thing.
Whack.
That's a thing that I was just wondering as well. Like, do they, like, I was on the shores of what's the of Mount Celestia? Is that what it's called? Mount Celestia?
Yeah.
I think that's like, the D&D. I think that's D&D heaven, is like the celestial plane or whatever it's called.
Or
like
the
Mount
Blessed
Celestia.
Fields of Elysium? No.
There's that too. There's a lot of different places like that. There's Valhalla as well.
I'm not familiar enough.
They got everything in there. They got a mix of mythologies in D&D. One of the things that makes D&D great. But I love the idea of people coming back in your world, that people have been resurrected, have like seen the great beyond, and have like interacted and lived in whatever that version is. And for different people, it might be different things. Someone who ends up a lawful evil soul who ends up in the nine hells and then comes back might be a much different person, having been in the worst possible place imaginable for what probably felt like an eternity, and then being back in a body.
Yeah, it's a very interesting circumstance, and maybe they've changed for the worse, right? So there's a lot of things to consider when you're talking about people coming back and the implications of that. Moving forward, I think we're going to just assume that if a person who comes back doesn't remember the afterlife, because that just is a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, all of these kind of, they create a lot of weird catches, and there's a lot of like intricacies that you'll have to think about in your own setting.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually seen in a game where a character died, and they went to try and petition their god for divine knowledge, knowing their friends were going to bring them back, saying like, no, 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 you got to tell me how I can defeat, because my friends are going to bring me back, and then I got to defeat the thing, which is just a really interesting situation because it's like,
I like that. Yeah.
yeah, right, like. It's interesting to consider. Of course, when they came back, they didn't recall their afterlife, which, whatever, bummer for them. But um, yeah. So we talked a little bit about like how people react to that, and yeah, I'm thinking a little bit about that too. Like, I've done something I've never really considered too deeply. How do the common people consider people who've come back? And I think in certain games like Dungeons and Dragons, if you're using the Forgotten Realms pantheon, you look at your god and say like, oh, my god is the god of nature. Death is part of nature. You're violating my god. You're evil, right? You could take it in that direction, and you could take the parties in your world in that direction and make it extreme.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last note on kind of making a world in which death is easily skirted. And we'll probably circle back to it a couple more times as we're moving through. But we covered this a little bit when we talked about character death. But when you make a world like that, it's very important that you think about the more meta kind of consequences of that, because taking death out of your game in a major way can really impact the stakes of your game. Which I think is worth noting here while we're talking about this.
Yeah, and I think that kind of moves into our next big point of discussion here is how does this affect your game from a meta perspective? If people can come back pretty easily, when you get to high level enemies, why do they ever stay dead? Why would they ever be like easily defeatable? Why would the Lich keep their phylactery in the place where they are? They wouldn't. They'd hide it somewhere that there's no way in hell, like 70 feet underground in the middle of the forest. They dug a big hole, right? Like, why the hell would they hide it with them?
There'd probably be traps too, because this is Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, likewise, the clone spell was something mentioned by Bionic Shiba in chat. If the clone spell is readily available, why would every noble worth their salt not have like 6 clones? Right?
Yep.
There's just no reason they wouldn't have that stuff hidden away, or maybe at least one clone.
And that kind of stuff, your players, as I always say, your players are smart, and the more that stuff kind of stacks on, they'll start to kind of pull at the threads. And when they're able to do things that the world are not able to do, and they just kind of seem readily available to the players, like why isn't everyone doing this? They'll start to feel less immersed in the world because it'll start to feel a little bit unbelievable, like the world is made for them, which it is, but you don't want your players to feel that way. So you definitely have to be careful with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I see Sword mentioning an old school reference. So back in older editions, when you would have multiple clones, they would kill each other. They'd all wake up and kill each other. So that might be like, if you want to put that in, that's the reason why they don't have 8 clones, why they only have the one hidden somewhere. But there's no reason they wouldn't have a clone hidden somewhere.
Was that in the rules?
Yes, it was. Don't worry about it. But there's more important meta implications
D&D.
here than just why nobles don't die or why your enemies keep coming back, which is super frustrating, by the way. And that is how that affects a character's backstory. A lot of characters are motivated by, my family was killed in something. Don't worry, once you get to 9th level, they're back. Got a hair in your locket? No problem. Your quest is solved. Oh. Well, that was my whole reason for adventuring. And now I have this family person who can't defend themselves I need to take care of.
So I guess, guys, this is it.
I'm gone. Yep, gotta retire.
I'll be rolling my new character, a murder hobo.
Yeah, but actually though, right? I mean, I feel like a lot of huge motivations for characters in games are an important NPC dies that they cared about, right? Or or something in their backstory where someone died, right? All of these things are important motivators.
For
for
sure.
character, and not being able to like the concept they can just be overcome, especially once you get to a certain level where it just is trivial to overcome them. Let's be real. Once you're up in the high teens of levels, level 13, 14, 15, whatever, this isn't, I mean, death is an inconvenience in 5th edition. And I think that's something to really keep in mind for your character, how that would reasonably affect your character.
And as another just kind of meta note for DMs, one of the best ways to have a iron hand over how easy this is just diamonds and say like, yeah, I mean it's 25,000 gold pieces, but you can't get a diamond for true resurrection. There are maybe 3 of those in existence. And then they're gone once they're used. That's the best way, in my personal opinion, to keep a gate on those spells as players start to get them is with diamonds and just not allowing them to have too many.
Yeah, well, exactly, and I think that is another commonly mislooked thing is the material components of spells and abilities. And we talked a little bit how to make those more engaging, you should make those quests and adventures, but that would also tie into the world. Like those are good quests and adventure. I could see that being like in a world where resurrection is fairly common. All right, your quest is to go into this ancient mine and find me this diamond because I need it because my brother just was murdered. He died in a joust and it sucked and I need him to, right? Powerful noble guy sends lowling adventurers to go get him a big diamond, right? To go find him the ancient diamond of the dwarves or whatever the hell, right? And having those kind of things, like if it's going to be a quest for your characters, if when your player characters die, they're going to have to do a quest to get the stuff to bring a friend back because it's just more fun, more engaging, more believable. You can have your random player, like your world, the NPCs in the world, also be doing stuff like that. And your adventurers that's the reason, one of the big reasons they can exist.
This is something that you were touching on a little bit earlier, Jeremy, that I want to circle back around to because we're talking about tragic backstories and how a lot of people are kind of motivated in that way. One thing that I think always gets overlooked is that the world is full of tragic backstories.
Oh yeah.
Every single person that you meet in the world, odds are, like, if you go into a town, odds are every single peasant in that town has a more tragic backstory than you because they're peasants and they don't have the power to act upon those backstories. All the time I see people go into, I go into towns, and this is a fine way to play, and I'm not even knocking this. I think it's good to do this a lot. And that is, goblins have attacked and killed a bunch of townsfolk, so the players need to go out and take them out. That's awful. That's horrifying for those townsfolk. Like, these monsters to them came in and slaughtered a whole bunch of people, took the things that were valuable from their town, and then scampered off into the woods. There's a whole bunch of people that have tragic backstories there that don't have the power to swear revenge and take up the sword, like the player characters do. And
because the goblins stole their sword.
Because the goblins stole all the swords, his goblins need those for killing more people. It's the circle of life, everyone. But a lot of the times players will take those quests without thinking about what it means for the villagers. And then a lot of the times when the villagers come back, there's no real catharsis in it. It's just kind of like, you killed the goblins, here's the gold. And again, that's okay, because sometimes you don't want to bring that kind of gravitas to your game, and you just want it to be, they go out and they kill the goblins and they get the gold, and we're not trying to keep things serious. But occasionally bringing that more serious tone into things where these goblins, well, there's my brother on the floor because we're in the middle of the funeral for him from these goblins. And we're all completely torn apart. That's a thing that can add a lot of weight to your game sometimes, and is okay to do, I would say, sparingly.
Yeah, I've had actually an interesting situation where it was kind of in that kind of vein. A town had been attacked, I think it was by gnolls, and they'd taken some people away. And the characters went out and they killed the gnolls, and they came back to the town looking for a reward. And the townspeople just they took everything we had. Whatever you found with them, that's your reward. That's all the wealth we had. And one of the players was really mad and just murdered the NPC. It's like, oh Jesus,
Oh, that's a murder hobo. That's a murder
Murder
hobo.
hobo.
That's that hurt me, honestly, to think
Yeah, it's
about.
brutal. But it's the kind of thing where some players, that's what they'll do. They'll be like, "Oh, where's my gold? I got screwed by these townspeople." And maybe that's your fault as a dungeon master for not, and in that case, it was my fault as a dungeon master for not setting the scene of the loss and the what it meant for the gnolls to have attacked and killed people and taken everything they loved and had of wealth. But it's also their fault as a player for just
No,
murdering
that's definitely bad. I mean, yours was a very abstract and nuanced issue that is debatable, and his was he was just kind of being a jerk. I would say, but yeah, aside the point of it, what about Jeremy? What about graveyards? What do you do with dead people? What about the physical remains of the people?
And this is really interesting because this is going to a different degree. I think this touches on a different degree of the impermanence of death, in the impermanence of death of the body, not of the soul, not of the mind, of the body itself. Because I feel like this also ties into like zombies, right? Zombies, skeletons, the undead in general. And I think the undead get a really bad rap in Dungeons and Dragons, because usually they're enemies, almost always. But I think that people in the world might not always see them like, right? Because people think of death in the real world, and there's funerals and graveyards, and the graveyard's haunted, and kids go out into the graveyard, woo, and then oh god, it's scary, they run away. And who's to say that same stuff doesn't happen in Dungeons and Dragons? Except maybe it's a ghost, or maybe the people like an actual ghost instead of just oh god, that was a cat and it made a sound, so we ran out of the graveyard thinking it was a ghost. It's interesting, like how people might see the undead in certain circumstances like that, like a ghost in a graveyard. Maybe the people of the town are okay with that. A banshee that haunts the graveyard at night. Well, it's just at night, and it's keeping the grave safe, right, from whatever might be there. Or worse, right? It's the haunted soul of someone that they know. If the people know who this undead
creature, that's the big one.
Do you want that soul to be destroyed? Optimally, right? It's laid to rest. Whatever is causing them to come back, be dealt with. But do you want adventurers to come by and just destroy it? No, probably not.
Yeah, that's great. In the same vein, like necromancers, I feel like necromancy, that is just hated by everyone, and for good reason.
Oh boy.
Because you're picking up the bodies of the people that you care about and using them for whatever purposes. Like even just imagine how like horrifying it would be beyond the even life after death if just the body of someone that you cared about was taken from its resting place. That would just be a terrifying and horrible thing to have happen. And that will then add in the layer that it will come back and attack you with its zombie and eat your brains. Yeah, well, that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, and so that's like an interesting thing to consider is, okay, well, how common are these things? How common are like natural undead, I'm going to say, right? A spirit coming back because it is tortured and haunting it on its own volition. And I think we can fair to say it's pretty rare, probably, right?
1 in 5.
That wouldn't oh god. that wouldn't keep people from having graveyards, for example. God, I just read a comment in chat, having to re-kill a loved one. And then I reread it, having to re-kill a loved Sheba. Don't kill them in the first place if they're a loved one. But no.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
But yeah, like what would prevent them from having a graveyard, right? And I think, if natural hauntings aren't super rare or aren't super common, and maybe necromancers are pretty rare and looked down upon, sure, they probably have graveyards. That's a very reasonable thing to do. You can go pay your respects to the dead. I mean, all throughout human history, that's been a thing. But maybe they take after other cultures. Like I know in Viking culture, they would put them set them on a ship, set the ship on fire, and set them out. or Viking burial ship. Maybe they wouldn't set it on fire. I don't know. The point is, the body would be consumed. It would be dealt with. And that could also be a totally reasonable thing. The rituals of your world, maybe in a setting where like a nature god is super. Maybe the bodies could be left out for the carrion bird, something like that. I could super see that in like maybe like a dark sun kind of setting. You could do something like that, or a wasteland kind of backstory where food isn't super common. It's almost like a bait. You could do some interesting stuff with it.
I agree. I like that a lot. What
And of
about
course, there's always funeral pie.
I was just gonna say, yeah, your rituals, your pyres, and then I mean the belief systems of people that pass on, and like what does it mean to inter someone or to burn them, or like does is resurrection a belief in the more abstract beyond just there's a spell called or sorry, reincarnation, a belief in the abstract beyond there's just a spell called reincarnation. The philosophies of your different groups of people in your world are probably as varied, or I won't say probably, should be as varied as they are on our world in a lot of places, because everyone's going to have their own take on what it means to die.
Yeah, and all of these kind of funeral rituals, whether they be religiously fueled or what have you, to be frank, they all stem from a practical purpose, and it's
Yeah.
deal with the body to prevent disease. In real life, oftentimes that is attributed to a more spiritual cause. Oh, you bury the dead because that way you can visit them and pray for them, or what have you. Or you burn the dead because their spirits will flow into will be more easily transferred from their body to the afterlife. People give these spiritual reasons, and coming up with spiritual reason in your world is important. But maybe it has a practical backdrop. Why do you burn your dead? To keep them from becoming undead.
Yep.
That's the literal reason. But that might not be what people think. People might take that as we burn them because it helps them reconnect with the Monitor, the great god of the sun, and so we put them into a small sun, this bonfire, right? It could be a whole bunch of things. Hell, in a more big city or something like that, the practical reason is space, and actually, and even then you could put an even more devious reason in. Oh yeah, the wealthy want you to burn your dead so that there's no way they come back. Like there could
I was just thinking, I was picturing
reasons.
oh yeah, you make sure you bury your dead in concrete. Like if you're in a very undead, a very undead rich area.
I think you just burn them all at that point, right? Oh, but then they could be bone. Burn them really hot.
Yeah, burn bone. Oh Jesus.
Technically, you can reincarnate to get a stat above 20. That is true, Shiva. That's true. But wait, no, it's not true. Do you keep your ability scores reincarnate? Anyway, not the point.
It's arguable. I don't. There's a whole thing. There's a whole thing with that you can kind of play around with. But Jeremy, want to talk medicine?
Yeah. I think medicine is an important thing to discuss here.
I think medicine in a world in which there is healing magic and there is a greater application of just bringing people back to life, medicine's probably not as advanced in that world. Or on the opposite, I could also see someone justifying that medicine is significantly more advanced because there are these incredible tools that people have to work with. But either way, there's probably an impact. There's a much different understanding, I think, of medicine in any world in which healing magic and resurrection exist.
Well, and I think that's a yes and a no. I think it depends on where you are in that world. If you're out in like the village out in the middle of nowhere, where like the gnolls attack and everyone dies and you can't do anything about it because you're peasants and that's all there is there, that's a very different situation, and their medicine is going to be kind of probably what you expect. Pretty bad.
You know how to do tourniquet.
Yeah, tourniquet and a splint. Here, let's pour this alcohol over your wound.
Drink this, cut off leg.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be pretty rough.
Yeah.
But as you get into more civilized areas, yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I feel like there's less and less, um, at least medical practicing is like a major deal. I imagine people would see it almost more as like, oh, so you couldn't be a cleric, right?
Yeah. Uh, because
Oh, so you weren't good enough to do that.
why study, why study? Or I guess like, but that's also what's so interesting about it is because medicine is a study versus cleric, which is more of like an inherent thing, it seems like, where people
Mhm.
are born into a particular religion and study that religion and then gain the power to heal, as opposed to like, it's not necessarily, you don't be a cleric because you want to heal. You be a cleric because you want to worship a god and then gain the power to heal.
Yeah, it's like it's understanding, I think, versus just faith. And I think that's an interesting juxtaposition there because the medicine, you're good at being a doctor by understanding the human body, by understanding, everything from like bacteria and how different um, plants
Just
or
diseases
medicines will affect
disseminate in
it.
populations, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's medicine. Whereas like a cleric is like, well, I believe in a monitor or Paylor. Give me your heals.
You're all better.
I don't understand what was wrong with you, but it's better now. And that's an interesting one, right?
And I just like, the more I'm thinking about this, the more I want to follow this rabbit hole, because I'm picturing in major cities where clerics can cure diseases. It's harder to like learn about diseases, because if you can cure a disease with a touch, why would you not do it that way? And so why would you bother studying like how to prevent disease when you can just fix it? But that seems like a situation in which there'd be more disease.
Yeah, well, that's another thing to consider, right? Can are there enough clerics to like thinking about it that way?
Yeah.
Is there enough magic to deal with the increase in disease, especially if you're going into like a city or something like that? I mean, even like a super high level paladin, like a 20th level paladin, they can do what, 20 people a day with lay on hands?
Yeah.
Not really that good.
A good cleric can do less.
That's not a lot of people.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, the cleric, yeah, it depends on how much you're like putting masculine word and stuff in there.
yeah, I was
But
counting lesser restorations as
yeah, I think
is
that's
the
fair.
baseline. But these, again, and it's easy to get lost on these rabbit holes the more you start to think about how this kind of magic is going to influence your world. Because I think out of all of the magic in D&D, this is the magic that we are the farthest from as society. Is that fair to say? Like necromancy and healing magic, these are the things that we kind of don't have as a society. Like
The most
Firebolt,
fantastical.
yeah, Firebolt, we got guns. Minor Illusion, we got iPhones, but we don't have. um, we don't have your disease is gone.
Yeah. And that's like a thing that I very rarely see actually come up in game. And that's something that's really worthwhile and worthwhile to, if you're playing in a setting where there isn't a lot of magic available or whatnot, or something would happen that would take magical people out of a city. Maybe it's a war or what have you. How is that going to affect the city in terms of its health? And honestly, it's going to go way fucking down because of how reliant I imagine people will get against that kind of stuff. And okay, I get you, Sheba. Penicillin's a big deal. Antibiotics are
Yeah,
big, but not really at the same level. And I mean, do people in this world know about penicillin? Probably not.
that's probably true.
Yeah,
On
a dark world.
So as a completely unrelated thing, Jeremy, what do you think it's like being an adventurer in a world in which resurrection is cheap and readily available? Because I feel it's not a good profession to get into, because
Really?
the reason I say that is because if it was easy, everyone would do it. And so I think in some of what we were talking about last week, our economics and our supply and demand, if it's easy to be an adventurer because you'll just come back and someone will bring you back, then it's not worth going out and getting yourself killed for money.
Oh, I see. If you could come back without having to be an adventurer and make money. You're saying if you just had the money anyway to come back? Why the hell would you go out if you already had the money?
No, I'm saying.
I'm really confused.
Okay, the point I'm getting at is.
Asking.
Yeah, okay. Let me stop back. The reason why people adventure, because there's often this idea equated with adventuring, which is, if you complete your level 1 adventure, you usually get enough gold to be set for life. That's a very appealing career. But but the reason that's the way, and I think it's okay that it's that way, and it makes sense that it's that way, is because no one wants to do the things that you're doing, because the odds of coming back from a first level adventure are extremely low.
That's true. You're talking about low level characters getting out.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that high level adventuring. I'm talking about just like, your basic questers and your traditional adventuring party in D&D. I think a lot of people would end up doing it if they could come back, and then it would also drive down the value of that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and it's a funky situation with that kind of stuff, right? Because I think the idea is once you have enough money to come back and you have like a way to like pretty much guarantee you come back, you got a friend at a town, give them some of your hair, you give them a whole pile of money, you give them a little bit extra money so they don't spend that other money you gave them, and say, look, if I'm not back in like a year, just bring me back, okay? Right? Once you get to that point, I feel like you're like Superman, right? Superman, not a hero, because Superman there's no danger, there's no threat. He's not brave because he's not going up against something that can actually defeat him. And I feel like that's kind of how you get as an adventurer in D&D once you get to like higher levels. It's like, I have a clone, I set it up somewhere. I literally cannot be, unless I go somewhere just absolutely ridiculously stupid like hell itself, right? There's no way something bad's going to happen to me that I can't come back from. And I think that's a weird thing to it's just strange to just totally discount. That being said, at low levels, it's a scary premise. I mean, it's a scary premise even today. Like, I don't know how many. I'm trying to think of a good situation. There aren't very many of these in the United States because we're very much a first world country. But like, if I had to take a sword, right, and go out into the wilderness and fight a bear, and like someone had to do it, I wouldn't be the first one to do it. Even if like you're set for life if you win, it's like, but I'm gonna lose. I'm not gonna win.
Like low level adventurers, like a lot of the times they have to go out and fight bears. That's like a thing. Think about how awful.
That's a very real life thing. It's like,
think about how awful that would be to fight a bear.
Yeah, sword and I are gonna go fight a bear.
Sword Courier, I was actually thinking about, would the Morts count as clones? There are some Morts that are clones, but they're mostly not.
I think there's a lot that's still to be known about the Morts in D&D.
The Morts are a very complicated.
Well, and even actually, like, to keep talking about like money, right, and like how much money characters make. So we're talking about that level 1 haul, right? Maybe like 100 gold.
Yeah,
that sounds pretty good for level 1 adventure.
Yeah, maybe a little more, maybe a little less.
So we divide that 4 ways. You got 25 gold each.
Oh, I was thinking a pop.
Okay, so we'll say 100 gold a pop.
Yeah, sure. Let's start off there because that's a big haul.
Sure.
That's a solid haul.
In terms of like what that costs for like lifestyle expenses, what's a lifestyle expense for like a peasant? A squalid lifestyle, maybe?
Squalid, I think, is actually considered a copper a day.
It's 1 silver piece.
For squalid? I thought gold. I thought gold was luxurious.
No. Gold is modest. That's
gold
1,000 days of the shittiest of the shit lifestyle. For a poor lifestyle, it's 2 silver a pop. So it's 500 days. It's basically a year of I'm living the peasant life and I have a hovel, right? The 500 days doesn't doesn't seem as good now that you look at that.
When you
right?
put it that way, yeah, I always thought that Squalid
Yeah.
Lifestyle was in the books
It's not really set for life.
as one copper piece.
And I mean, in terms of like, if you wanted to go into the player's handbook, they have some sections in the back about like hirelings and how much they cost. I don't remember what a skilled hireling actually costs.
I mean, regardless, yeah, I see your point. It's
2 silver a day is unskilled. That's how much money that you make a day
okay.
as an unskilled hireling. As a skilled hireling, so that'd be like what, like a carpenter. It's 2 gold a day. So it's only 50 days worth of work for that one adventure.
Yeah,
it's really not as high paying as a lot of
high
people,
of a
I think,
proposition.
think.
Certainly not me, based on what I thought. Yeah, you've changed.
I'm not gonna go fucking die to a bear. I'll work for 50 days. Thank you.
I'll work for a month. Yeah. Jeremy, is there anything else that you want to talk about? Because I think we're getting kind of wrapped
we've
up
gotten
here.
into the rambly part. I think there's a lot of really interesting things that you can do with the afterlife, with the impermanence of death. I think as a dungeon master, it's important that you make a decision about this. And that decision can be, there is an afterlife, and this is how it works. There is an afterlife, people think, but they don't know how. There might be an afterlife, or there isn't, and people know. And I think you got to pick one of those 4 and just know which one you're sticking with, and that's how you can help to shape the world. In one setting that I was running a while ago, the idea of an afterlife, people believed there to be an afterlife, but they didn't know for certain. And so one of like the big characters, big NPCs that was sort of a villain, sort of not, a kind of demagogue that ruled over one of the towns, was all about that. Like, hey, I know the thing, the gods favor me, follow me, and I can help you. And it was a really interesting situation because the characters who were in this impasse were like, I don't know if he's super evil or right. And just knowing which one you want to can help to shape your world in a really interesting way and allow you to create those interesting little tie-ins.
Very well said, Jeremy. I had one more thing I wanted to talk about briefly with related to this, which is, and I will do so extremely briefly. There's a lot of people that are old in D&D.
What do you
That's
mean?
it. Elves.
Oh,
elves and dragons. There's things that have incredible lifespans, for which life is a much longer endeavor and not nearly so brief as we might think of it as. And it'd be interesting. I think it's just an interesting thing to also think about in your setting is how those who have longer lifespans look at the more sentient creatures that they interact with that have much shorter ones, which is something that we don't have to deal with as a society. Like, there's things that have shorter lifespans than us, but we are sentient, and they, generally speaking, are not. And by generally speaking, I mean 100% of the time. So that's a very interesting thought on like how those more long-lived races might interact and think about death. And when they see creatures that are probably friends in a lot of cases go down much shorter than them just by the nature of their race, which is the thing to think about.
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept. Actually, a friend of mine has been playing with that concept with their elves. How do elves view human life? They understand and value humans, but when a human dies, that's unfortunate. I'll get a new human. It's like a pet.
Yeah, kind of sad.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing to consider in your world because I think that can change things pretty wildly, whether it be character interactions or what have you. So we've rambled enough about death and the impermanence of death and blah, blah, blah. And what it really comes down to in the end, give it some thought. Give it some thought. Think about how perhaps that could fuel some quests in your world. Maybe people looking for the correct reagents to bring a character back. Nothing feels better than if a player dies, if a character dies, and they're like, oh, we need to bring this character back, and they already know what to do. They know, all right, we need to go get these reagents because we did a quest for some guy to get them so he could bring someone back. rather than it doesn't feel as, oh, they died, let's figure out a way to bring them back. You know, it's not an out of character meta choice, it's something already, and that's nice. And also, yeah, it can also help to inform how different races interact, how
Yep.
the nobility and the peasantry interact, and all of that stuff. Any last words, Pete?
My last words are, and now we're going to move on to another segment of our show in which we answer questions that you have posed us upon Discord. And that segment of the show is called Ask Pete and Jeremy.
Is that our working
That's a jingle. That's a jingle in progress.
Wow.
So our first question comes from. Thank you. Our first question comes from Bionic Shiba. Can you tell us a non-D&D related story from your life of your choice? Just any story from. I have a story about death I can share. Jeremy, do you know this story that I'm going to tell?
No, unless I do. But I don't think I do.
I've told this to you before, I think, one time. And it's one of my favorite stories. This is from my family mythos in a lot of ways. And I have be a great aunt. All of the names will be removed for the purposes of protecting the individuals involved. Yeah, this is. I had a great aunt and another great aunt who had been fighting for 40, 50 years. They hadn't spoken in an amount of time that was about that long. And that one of those aunts was on her deathbed. And they kind of brought her in a phone and she was barely able to speak. And they call up my other aunt, who again will remain nameless. And they kind of set up this phone call between these two that haven't spoken in 40 years so that she can say goodbye to her sister after all this time. It's a very touching moment. And my one of my aunts gets on the phone and she says, because there are people that were in the room with her on that side, so we have both sides of the coin here, and there are people that were in the room of the aunt that was, on her deathbed. The one aunt says, "How are you doing, Betty?" And the other one replies, "Not too good," and then died immediately at the end of that sentence. Which is kind of grim, but it also, like, everyone in the family, like, a little bit later, couldn't help but being like, that's absolutely outrageous and ridiculous. It was impossibly crazy thing that happened, and that's a family myth that will be passed down forever. And that's something that happens for my life.
I have a much less interesting one. Once I had a pet hamster and it died and I was very sad. So I dug a hole and I buried it. And then the next day, the hole was all dug up and it was all gone.
Oh, sorry, Jeremy.
So the next time I had a pet, it was a leopard gecko. And then it eventually died. And so when I went to bury it, I dug a deep, put it in a shoebox. I buried it. And then I took a huge metal like bell from a ship because I had one of those for some reason and stuck it on top. And then the next day it was all flipped over and dug up and the thing gone. That's my story.
It's a good story.
A lot more touching than yours.
Yes, mine was just very dark.
Humor.
Mine feels like something that would be in like a Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah.
Next question is also from Shiba. What's your favorite joke? Do you have an answer to this?
No. I don't. I've got nothing.
My family, again, this is another family mythos. The other side of my kind of
actually, I do have a favorite joke.
Has a family joke. I'm going to tell it to you very briskly. Because if you actually get involved, the way my family tells jokes, they're in eternity. And if we want to really go down this path, it would take me, like, the way that it's told, usually it would take me like 20 minutes to tell this joke. But I'll do it very briskly. There once was a master bricklayer who, every single time that he built a house, he ordered the exact correct number of bricks for that house. He went through project after project, only ordering the exact number of bricks. However, However, over one particular order, he finished his order, and at the end of it, he had ordered one too many bricks. And looking at that one brick on the ground, he got incredibly furious. And so he took the brick and he just looked up and he just chucked it as far as he could up into the air. And that's the end of that joke.
Okay.
And then sometime within the next 3 months, you tell the second half of that joke. Which is where there's it's just a completely unrelated joke and you set it up, and there's two people on a plane, one of them smoking a cigar and one of them has an annoying dog, and they both essentially agree to throw their other one out the window of the plane if the other one agrees to do the same. So they both throw their cigar and their dog out the window, and then the person looks out the window and they see the dog on the wing of the plane, and they go, and they had something in their mouth, and the person goes, a cigar, and they go, no, a brick. And the idea is that it's just a setup for this bad joke, but the joke of it is that it's supposed to take just an eternity to get the payoff for the joke, to the point where they don't even remember the original joke. And that's my family on that side.
I don't think you asked about your family, but okay. That's your favorite joke.
That's my favorite. I love it
right,
because of just I love how elaborate it is. I love how much work it is to get there, and the payoff is okay.
You see, my favorite joke actually follows that exact kind of concept. And it's a friend of mine. They tell a lot of jokes like this. They played on DnDTime a couple times. Kalar, otherwise known as Savage. And the way the joke works is he'll start to tell this story, and somewhere in the first 10 minutes of this incredibly elaborate story, it'll be like, you were traveling through the Serengeti when you came upon a hut. You strode inside amidst the smoke and herbaceous scents of the incense burning to find an elderly woman. Stares at her unblinking eye. And like goes on through this whole thing talking about this woman, and then you have to go on like a quest for her and all of this stupid stuff. And it goes on and somewhere in those first 10 minutes, he'll set it up. And then there'll be like an hour of story of just improv, random story to come to the very end, which is just a pun about a happy medium, about finding a happy medium, because it makes the woman the medium. And it's just incredibly elaborate stories for very dumb puns and the payoff. And I very much enjoy those. Those are my jokes.
Did you hear about the gnomish divination wizard who broke out of prison?
No, Pete.
He was a small medium at large.
Yep.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Yeah, I like cookie dough,
but
I also like chocolate. Just Belgian chocolate.
Give me that straight vanilla.
Ooh, interesting. If you could be reincarnated as any non-human animal and retain all memory of your current life, what would you turn into, and what would you do with your new animal body?
I would be a gorilla.
No,
I'd be a gorilla, and then I'd get a job as like an accountant and be the funniest thing in the world.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's got to be something that lives longer than humans, probably, and has the ability to vocalize like humans and like move around and do stuff.
Yeah, so thumbs was the big one for me. Gorilla. That's why I picked gorilla.
Just gorilla, yeah. Like that's probably the option. But then I'll get poached or something and die.
No, if you can be the world's smartest accountant gorilla, like no one's gonna kill you.
You know, but you gotta like. I don't know.
You're going to make an immense amount of money just by existing. Also, you could fight for like a gorilla citizenship by being the first of your kind. Like you're a movie. You're the plot of a movie.
Yeah, it'd be tough, but I think that's the only option because it has thumbs. Yeah. All right, most unusual question you've ever been asked. Maybe that one.
I can't.
I mean, I'm sure I've been asked weirder questions, and can I answer it? Just did.
Yeah, I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. If I come up with something before we get back, we'll do that.
All right, those are all from Sheba. We had some questions from Matty Morgs. What is a memorable fighter that you've played as or run for, and what made that character memorable to you?
while we're talking, can I just talk about Acer the Best since we've already touched around it twice?
Well, I think Acer the Best is actually my choice as well.
Well,
Go on, Pete. Tell them about Acer.
I'll start, which is I made a character named Acer. He was my first D&D character, not the first tabletop RPG character I played, but my first D&D character. I didn't know how the system worked. I rolled a bunch. To put it through a bizarre bunch of circumstances that involved me rolling really well and then doing a re-roll digitally, but using what I rolled as the minimum, I ended up with an outrageous character that had like, multiple 20s and then like an 18. Like he was the best at everything, and he was Acer, and he was the best.
Yeah, he was the best. Now, Pete, what about Acer was maybe his one flaw, his one potential like downside that could come back to haunt him?
You see, in his backstory, he had a brother that was looking for him because he was like an outcast of his clan. He was a half elf, and he was resented by his full elven brother for being the first in lineage, even though he and not. So he was out hunting him and trying to bring him down. And so that was Acer's kind of one downside that he had. He was also very ugly. It was canon.
Yeah, so he was hideous and was being hunted by his brother. Now, Pete, what happened to Acer?
He got reincarnated. Acer got reincarnated, solving all of his problems and improving him in the process by turning him into a halfling with halfling luck and an increase in his primary stat, which was dexterity.
Yep.
While retaining all of the skills that he had gained as a half-elf, because half-elves are full of like skill bonuses and minor things that can't be unlearned by resurrection, but gaining lucky and brave.
Yep.
He was a good character.
And better stats, actually, for your primary thing.
He ended up with better stats, too.
So and that was Acer. Busted. That was not... Ugh.
But here, at the end of the day, the thing is he was still just a fighter, so it's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't have any feats. He was good.
Matty Morgs also asks, have you implemented or been asked to follow some interesting table etiquette in your history? For example, you need to touch your nose to talk out of character. Dice must be rolled in a tray to count to do something or not to do something in particular, like use hand sanitizer or what have you. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, a lot of groups that I play in person, the dice have to be rolled on the table, otherwise nothing. I also have played with a group that the dice, no matter where they fall, that's what it is. Flip the goddamn couch. We need to see what that dice was. I've seen some interesting.
We always played. If you miss the table 3 times, you critically fail.
Oh,
that was us. Remember, 3 strikes, you're out.
I don't remember that, but I believe it.
Yeah. We also. I also played. I mean, in terms of etiquette stuff, we've played like can't have your phone out while we're playing D&D.
Yep.
Is a thing I've done before. I don't know. Stuff like that. Nothing too crazy on my end.
Yeah, I haven't had anything very bizarre like touching your nose, talk out of a character.
That's an interesting one.
Again, most of my experience playing has been, besides with DnDTime, which is a whole nother story.
Which is weirdly now the most of my experience playing.
Most of my live play experience has been with small groups of like close friends. I haven't really done much in the way of Adventurers League or anything like that. And so, I don't have a lot of experience playing with groups that I'm not already very, very comfortable. So I think some of those kind of like particulars don't apply to me as often, or haven't applied to me. Beer and pretzels is often used to describe a style of play. However, if you have your druthers, what is your food and drink choice for playing a game with friends or family?
If I'm GMing, I don't really like to eat and drink water, and that's it for me. If I'm GMing, if I'm playing, alcohol, and that's it. I'm not a big snacker while we play D&D. Played a whole campaign drinking a bottle of wine a session.
Valid. I like Chinese food.
That's an elaborate one. At the table?
I used to always do that way back in the day. I would get, because we'd play like once a month or something. I get a thing of Chinese food, like one of the special Chinese food boxes. And I just get that, and I'd go and I'd sit down and be like, all right, guys, we're good. I got my Chinese food, let's play. And I would just slowly eat my Chinese food as we played. I'd peck at it throughout the evening.
Jeremy, no cheap wine and wings over.
Oh fuck, dude.
It's such an awful combination of things, though.
I mean, I didn't have the wine, so the wings were just
fair.
Great. Yeah, wings are also pretty good. I'm not really a beer guy. I hate beer.
That's a strong switch. I'm not really into beer. I hate beer.
Yeah, I don't like beer at all.
I just snorted. Jesus. Greener Gray. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was saying I don't mind pretzels. That's all. Go ahead.
Fair enough.
The Greener Gray asks,
how well do you think you'll do in a post-apocalyptic Fallout, Mad Max, etc. style situation? Better than I deserve to, but not well.
Yeah, no, I'll do worse than I expect.
I
think I'm gonna die. So.
I'm gonna get carried by my friends. I think I got a lot of friends that do very well in that.
Oh, that maybe. I think I'd be such a hindrance that my good friends would actually just leave me behind because they wouldn't have a choice.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's not the case for me.
Like, actually, maybe I get like.
But there's also
some
like
survival skills. Maybe
you have engineering. Like, I feel like you are a luxury item, Jeremy, where you have engineers that, like, in the long run would have value. Once like a civilization started to get okay, fair enough.
No. I would be cannibalized before that. I
think I have some luxury goods. Like, I'm a musician that has value for morale.
Yeah, maybe.
Like luxury goods, I think I have that I could tack on to I can tack onto a part. Which of you makes it furthest in a horror movie? It's a coin toss.
100% Pete. Pete's the character that like almost dies a whole bunch. Like, Pete does something that like, oh, he's going into the closet. No, he shouldn't go into the closet. Oh, he opened the door. Oh, it's just a broom. And then someone else I die somewhere in the background. That's what happens.
It's probably true. I'm sorry, Jeremy.
He's the one who just should die over and over, but doesn't. And doesn't like believe that anything bad's happening. By the end of the movie, you just think everyone's
weirdest session you've had in D&D and how so? Oh man. There's been some strange stuff in D&D time, and it's probably from there, but to pull from outside. You know, it was a weird session, Jeremy. It's from that first campaign, the first time I ever played D&D, when it was, and we were in that biosphere, and I was feeling kind of sick. And I remember at one point I threw James's necromancy DNA into the ooze of death. That was a weird session. And then a nuke went off somewhere, and we were in a ship.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
So that's kind of where we were at. There was a nuclear bomb, and we were in a place, and I gave a giant ooze the DNA of a necromancer, and then I grabbed the magic conch, and said, "Praise the Helix," and then we walked out and stayed in an abandoned ship where the goblins were.
True.
And that was that session.
Also in that session, the necromancer mentioned a moment ago bought a gimp suit, believing it was leather armor.
Oh, that was my bad.
Yeah, that was your fault.
Oh wait, no. That was how I got him to wear my armor. Like, never mind. He did that on his own. And then I was like, no, wear this. I think she was that combination of words. Yeah.
That was a combination. That campaign, I believe, what did we call that in the end? Just
Chaos? I think that was called Chaos World.
Chaos World. Yeah, I mean, that one of the characters was literally Andrew Jackson riding well, he wasn't riding it originally, but he was Andrew Jackson for a while, former president of the United States of America. And then he ended up riding
an alpaca,
flying alpaca
it was a jetpack alpaca.
Yeah, an alpaca with a jetpack that weaned whiskey, I think.
As another kind of just like how anything goes, that campaign was, I played two characters in it.
Yeah. And one of them was evil and the other wasn't.
Yeah, them's the brothers. All right. Shiva asks, how do you want to die? My answer is, I don't.
Yeah, my preference is not. I've always thought like ways. I know how I don't want to die. I don't want to get eaten by a shark. That would suck.
Shark Week.
Yeah, that'd be pretty bad. I don't want to like. I don't want to like get hit by a car. That'd be pretty bad.
I think my firm answer is without being aware that it was happening and without any. That was it. Without being aware that it was happening.
If you had to like know that you were gonna die, I don't know. Mine would probably be like skydiving and then the parachute didn't work, like, and you hit the ground pretty quick.
Oh, that sounds so bad, though.
Yeah, but like, it sounds so bad, but like at the same time,
I want to be hugging a nuclear bomb.
Ooh,
that's
yikes.
Just I'm dust. Just dust. See you later, everyone. I'm dust now.
Yeah, those are pretty bad.
Yeah, but like anyway, I'm not gonna get into the grittiness of how bad I think it would be to die in these different ways. But that's it. That's my pick: is not being aware that it was going to happen and then having it happen instantly and painlessly.
Actually, I want to change mine. I want to die by discovering resurrection just in time before I die. There we go.
Oh wait, actually, can I get on your? I want to die how Jeremy does.
No, it's too late.
All right, I want to die 2 days ago, but now I've lived past it, so now I'm immortal because I died 2 days ago and I'm still here. Good point about Maddie Morgs. Good point about liches. Where would a lich, say Lemic specifically, hide in his phylactery?
Where would a lich
hide his?
Probably on another plane of existence.
Can I guess? Can I take a guess? I don't know.
Please go ahead.
Good point about lich. Where would a lich, say Lemic specifically, hide his phylactery?
Yeah.
In Grimbo.
Oh, yikes.
Poor Grimbo.
All right. Oh boy. Well,
poor Grimbo.
With that, this is why you always loot your enemies, guys. You never know when a lich is going to hide their phylactery
inside a beholder's body.
All right. I guess that is the end of DnDTime Talks for tonight. Thank you guys for hanging out. This has been a bizarre one, but I think it was fun. Hopefully we've got some food for thought for you guys. Think about, death and oh god. But not death is really the thing you got to think about.
Think about life.
Yeah, think about live. If you haven't gotten enough D&D and you want some more, head over to Matty Morgs' channel, twitch.tv/Matty Morgs. We're going to be hosting him here if you're too lazy to move and click the screen. Or if you just don't know how to spell Matty Morgs. But you could also find him in the chat. So that's another way to get him.
It's spelled Matty Morgs. It's written right there.
But yeah,
it's on the screen.
Awesome Dungeons & Dragons content. Not sure what he's doing this week, but usually he kind of themes the week around something. So head on over there.
For sure.
Dungeons & Dragons right after this. And of course, on Friday, Pete and Jeremy's D&D time. Come play some D&D with me.
Sunday, Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Penultimate session, maybe?
Session, maybe. We shall see.
Should be cool. Matty Morgs send mini painting this week of the debut. The debut of Gotcha Caps.
Of the Gotcha. Oh boy, it's one of those days where we can't do anything.
That's kind of where I'm at today. That's it. I'm Pete.
And I'm Jeremy.
And this is DnDTime Talks.
DnDTime Talks. Good night, everyone.